Hi, I'm Monica Hemingway with the Gardening Products Review, and today I'm going to be talking about self-watering planters or self-watering containers. So what they are, why we use it, all the different types that are available, and how you actually plant and grow things in a self-watering container. So first of all, what is it? Well, contrary to what it sounds like, it doesn't water itself. You still have to give it water. But what it does do is allow you to water less frequently by filling up a reservoir that sits underneath your plant pot, basically. So a self-watering container has a number of different parts to it. The first part is the planting part. So this would have the soil and the plants in it. Underneath that, usually underneath it, is a water reservoir that you're going to fill up with water. So there has to be some way to get water into that reservoir at the bottom, and that is usually going to be a tube of some sort that is inserted into the planter. One nice feature to look for is something like this, where it will have an indicator that shows you how much water is in the planter. So it's usually some sort of floating system inside, and the little indicator will show you the water level. There's also going to be a divider between the water and the potting mix, right? You don't want your soil going down into the water, so there'll be something that sits in between there. One other thing to look for, and not all planters have this, but it's a good idea if it does, is some sort of overflow mechanism. So if there's too much water in the reservoir, it will come out instead of having your plants sitting in a bucket full of water. So why would you use a self-watering container? Well, first of all, the biggest reason that I like them is it provides consistent moisture for your plants. You don't have to water it. Like we live here in Tucson, I'd have to water twice a day in the summer. With a self-watering container, I can get away with once every couple of days, and the water will wick up into the roots of the plants on a regular basis, like consistently, and so your plants tend to be healthier and you tend to have better yields if you're growing vegetables. Now keep in mind that some plants don't like to be consistently moist, so things like succulents and cactus, some of the Mediterranean herbs like rosemary and things, they don't necessarily like to be moist all the time. They like to dry out in between, so those would not be a good candidate for a self-watering container. Self-watering containers are great if you travel a lot or if you're not home all the time, because again, you don't have to water every day, so you can do it more infrequently. Or if it's inconvenient to water. So say you're on a balcony and you don't have a water spigot out there and you've got to take a bucket of water out to water your plants, self-watering container is great because you don't have to do it every day, right? It's also a more efficient use of water. Because the water is in the reservoir underneath the plants, it's not evaporating. And by filling through a spout, instead of spraying your plant with water, you're not losing as much water to the evaporation and to spraying it around the plant and having it leak. So much more efficient. And for some plants, like things like tomatoes, they're more prone to fungal issues and diseases if you're watering the leaves. But by using a self-watering container, you're actually watering the roots only and not the leaves. So you tend to have healthier plants because of that. There are a bunch of different types of self-watering containers. So this one is a fairly decorative one. It's from Lechuza. It's a brand I absolutely love. They have fantastic products. This has been sitting out in the sun for 6 years and it still looks like new. This is another self-watering planter. It's a large one, and as you can see, we've got a small pomegranate tree growing in it. One of the things I like about this is that with the fill tube here, we simply have our drip irrigation going right into the fill tube. So whenever the irrigation goes on in the garden, it's filling the water reservoir for this tree. So with these types of containers, it's not just for flowers or vegetables. You can actually get them so that you can grow trees and things like that in it. You can also get other sorts of self-watering containers that are more sort of utilitarian. They're more like planters, and those are fantastic for growing vegetables in. So I use ones from GrowBox, and EarthBox is another one. Gardener's Supply has some really nice large planters that we've used to grow tomatoes in very, very successfully, and they're also self-watering systems. You can get large planters, not just smaller containers like this, but really large ones. And one we're using right now is the Terrazza Trough planter from Gardener Supply, which is fantastic. It also is self-watering. There are all sorts of ways you can build them yourself for cheap. DIY, if you just Google it, there will be tons of ways you can do it by using a bucket or by using a storage tote or any of those sorts of things, and you can make your own self-watering container. Or one of the things I really like to do is if you've got a really nice planter or a container or a pot of some sort, and you want to convert it from a conventional one into self-watering, you can just use this. Now I get this from Gardener's Supply, and it's got the water trough reservoir underneath. It's got your separation right here, and these edges fold up like that. So you can just shove this down into your pot, and it will prevent all the soil and stuff from falling down around it. And it's got this nice water fill spout. It does have an indicator. I don't have it here, but that floats in there so you know how much water there is. Most of my pots that I buy, decorative pots, I put one of these in, and it comes in different sizes for different pots. So this makes your life easy. So how does it work, right? How are you going to do this? Well, I thought I'd show you how to set up this Lechuza planter self-watering container. So first of all, here's the bucket. One thing I like here is it has handles, which makes it easy to take it in and out. And it just fits in here. Now, I don't know if you can see, but the water will sit down there in the bottom of it. And then this piece simply goes down into there to separate the water reservoir at the bottom from the soil. One thing to keep in mind is that you should really take the soil out of these planters every year. The reason being, the roots tend to grow down through these separators into the water reservoir. So you could find that you have a whole mess of roots sitting down there at the bottom, and you want to take those out every year. So this goes in here, and then we have the fill spout, which fits nicely in there. So you can see. Okay. Now, one thing to notice is that at the bottom of this, we've got these sort of holes, these big depressions. That is the area that is going to wick the moisture from the reservoir up into the planter. So you want to make sure that those depressions are filled with your potting mix, and that you're using moist potting mix when you fill up your container. If you use dry potting mix, it's not going to wick anything. And if you let your planter dry out, it's also not going to wick the water from the reservoir up into your plants. So what I'm going to do is I have some nice moist potting mix here. Don't use garden soil. You want to use potting mix. There are different types, and there are some companies that say they have a potting mix that is specifically for self-watering containers. I don't know that it really makes all of that difference. I just use a good quality mix. If I'm growing edibles, I'll use an organic mix. Otherwise, just a nice lightweight mix. And I'm going to pack it down into those depressions at the bottom, so you can see they're filled up, right? After that, you simply plant as you normally would. Once you have all your plants in there, you will then water from the top so that the roots get nicely settled, and you will then use the spout to fill up the container with water, the reservoir. And that's it. That's all there is to a self-watering container. Then when you see the water level getting low, you just fill it up in the spout and you're done. And depending on where you live, that's going to be once a day, once a week. Larger ones in some areas of the country can actually go a couple of weeks before you need to refill them. Just make sure that the soil stays moist. You don't want it to dry out, otherwise it won't be wicking the soil. And that's it. So I'm going to show you a few examples of different types of containers that we've got set up in our garden here, and hopefully you will find a style that works for you. And I strongly recommend these. Any kind of self-watering container is going to make your garden grow better, healthier, and more easily.